So don't tell me the next best thing is this. We're going to elect Trump and, hey, man, it's better than the Democrats. I don't care. They're murdering our country. On what timeline? Are we going to murder the country in 10 years or 5 years? You're still murdering the country. Trump promised to be that leader. He's not. It's time to move on. It has been one disappointment after another, and that is because of corruption.
One of the leading voices on the dissident right, Nick Fuentes, says Trump has been an unmitigated disaster and it's time to move on. This is the guy that names his show America First, was a diehard Trump supporter back in 2016, but is rightly, in my mind, saying that he's a disaster and has proven to be a total fraud. So let's see why he thinks that. Please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
Trump has been fully assimilated. He has fully been compromised by the GOP. And there's nothing risky, nothing edgy. There's no entrepreneurial spirit. Look what happened to Elon Musk. Elon Musk came in. He was maybe the last push because he's a little younger and he bought Twitter and, he's the Rocket Man and everything like that. Elon came in with Doge. He got chewed up and spit out in 3 months. Elon was a little bit of energy, he was kind of like a little shock therapy for MAGA. And he lasted 3 months. He said, we're going to come in and we're going to bring in all these young guys and we're just going to move fast and break things. We could just do things. Remember, we could just do things. We're going to cut $1 trillion from the deficit. He got chewed up and spit out in 3 months. And now look at where we are. Nothing that has been promised has come to fruition. Can we end the wars? No. Trump wants to go back to Afghanistan. We're bombing Iran. We're building a base in Gaza. Mass deportations, Trump says, not so fast. We actually need all the people. We need the illegal farm workers. We need the illegal hospitality workers. We need the illegal construction workers. We're going to shut down H-1Bs, foreign students. Not so fast. We need all those Asians to fund our universities and do all the jobs that Americans are too retarded to do. Cut the deficit, forget about it. Epstein files, they don't exist.
Yeah, man, he's mostly right here in my mind. He's right. Elon Musk went to Washington, got chewed up and spit out in 3 months. And just think of how the legacy media reacted to that moment, too, when he was in Washington. They acted like this is an existential crisis, that actually reducing spending and rooting out kind of corruption and waste in government was the corruption in the eyes of the legacy media. Not the status quo that's ruining our country through debt and inflation. No, it was Elon Musk. And Elon Musk, I think, really recognized once he got into Washington how unserious these Republicans were on the spending issue. How much they only treated that like a campaign pledge and campaign rhetoric to secure their victory and then just abandon it right after that. Yeah, he did find a lot of fraud in the Social Security Administration, people over 150 years old collecting aid, and the system's not weeding out those transfers. That's for sure. But look at how, again, they responded to that. The Republicans, rather than actually using that as a rallying cry to uproot more waste, no. He got into a schism with Trump over spending, and Trump got into a schism with Thomas Massie over those things. So this is what we're seeing play out, that the Republicans are utterly unserious about fixing the issues that Americans have addressed.
Can't afford a home? Well, get lost. Here we are a year in, your golden age. And it was rotten from the start because the donors got involved. And you have to understand that these things go hand in hand. When Trump started, he was not surrounded by the money. When Trump started, he funded his primary campaign with like $70 million. And it was just him and a small staff, and he was on Twitter, and that was it. And that's why it was energetic. That's why it was daring and risk-taking and exciting. And what happened really right after he won the election the first time in 17 and 18 is that all of the interests surrounded him, the money, the shills, the personnel, the bureaucrats. And the second that happened, they poisoned the well. And suddenly it became cautious and conventional and boring and safe. And suddenly it became about everyone getting a handout. It became about patronage. Everybody getting their back scratched. Everybody getting taken care of under the table.
Yeah, this was an organic movement at the start. Make America great again. And, you might say that Trump isn't driven by money, but the boundaries in terms of money are different in the real world, where he's accumulated masses of money, and the political world where there is patronage. There is being won over by these donor classes. I think Nick is exactly right about that. And I think it's worth mentioning and noting and actually observing that it is a lot of these Never Trumpers from 2016. If you remember that National Review piece, Never Trump, signed on by a lot of these supervillain neocons, those are the people that Trump's taking more advice from right now. It is the Ben Shapiro's. It is the Mark Levins. It is the Lindsey Graham, who he's specifically carved out time and prioritized to campaign for. But guess who gets to be primaried? Who has to be primaried? Thomas Massie. Guess who has to be dragged on Twitter? Rand Paul. Those two even stuck by him during Russiagate, when supervillains like Lindsey Graham did not. They were totally complicit in that absurd narrative that he was working for Putin while he was supplying Ukraine with arms and lambasting them for giving Snowden safe haven, shredding the INF. Lindsey Graham went along with that establishment plot to undermine him, and Massie and Rand Paul didn't. But who does he stick by? He rewards loyalty only to the swamp creature neocons like Lindsey Graham and Randy Fine.
Israel lobby, Wall Street, Silicon Valley, the corporate tax cuts, moving the embassy. It became about everything other than the people. These things go hand in hand. And this is what I said last year. Like, all of these ideas that we talk about on the show, about personnel, about the Israel lobby, about the Trump campaign, about why things aren't happening quickly or at all these things are deeply related. If the Heritage Foundation is controlled by Israel lobbyists, if the Republican Party is controlled by the Israel lobby and the interests, if they're policing the young people in the speech, if they're working for the donors and the rich, then you're never going to get the good policy. You're never going to get your American revival. They're fucking killing our country.
Yeah, this is the uniparty. That's why there's so much continuity in policy no matter who you elect. It's the same lobbies that are entrenched in power regardless of who you elect, regardless of how great they might come off in the campaign. The interests behind it all are still the same. I mean, Trump is not that unique, in terms of his policies and his, slight modifications of the things that are done in Washington. It was just his presentation that seemed so radically wild to the political status quo at the time. And that's why I think a lot of the, Democrat criticisms of Trump are retarded. They're pointing to things that aren't really that tangential. It's actually the policies, the foreign policy, the domestic policy, the hate speech rewrites, the support for Palantir, expansion of the surveillance state, the regulatory apparatus, endless spending sprees, inflation. All of those things are tangible, not Trump tweets mean things, or, he's evil, or he's a fascist. Yeah, the merger of corporate and state power has been a thing long before Trump, let me tell you.
Every time the president of the United States says we have to take care of the universities before the young people, we have to take care of Hyundai and the South Koreans before we train up our own workforce, they're killing our country. They're murdering our country. In order to satisfy all the special interests and give the political kickbacks, we're literally murdering our country. And the whole idea behind Trumpism is that we could transcend the petty politics, the wheeling and dealing, the quid pro quo, the money power. The idea was, if we could transcend that, if we could have the people elect one leader, and if he wasn't beholden to the interests, he could get in, hire the right people, and just fix it.
I mean, I have to say, that was a really idealistic viewpoint for anyone that held that. I don't blame people for being, looking for hope in that direction. I mean, We need hope in some regards, but it's not going to come through a single political savior in Washington, D.C. And that's not to say you shouldn't have preferences of who gets elected. I think you probably should. But let's not fool ourselves by thinking that this is going to usher in this new era of greatness. It's a systematic issue, the fact that we have a perverse government that violates the basic tenets of the Bill of Rights and engages in empire-building schemes and builds a multi-level, fleecing operation to redistribute wealth in this country, mostly to the corporate connected class. That's what we're dealing with.
And everybody'd be unhappy. The media'd be pissed. Everybody'd be pissed. There'd be pain and economic pain and maybe chaos. But with a firm hand and with consistency and with leadership, that we could actually revive the country. We would have to break the back of all these self-perpetuating systems that have gotten us to this point. That was the whole idea. That's what made it interesting and exciting and worth supporting. And the second that it backslid into everything that came before, that's when I jumped off. That's when I said, I'm out. But all the idiots stuck around because, a lot of them, they just caught on way too late. A lot of people got red-pilled in like 2021. A lot of the people that voted for Trump in 24, they became conservative after the pandemic. They weren't there for the first time. And so their support for Trump is just like a generic conservatism. It's like a generic reaction to the excesses of the left. And so they weren't there for that magical campaign. They weren't there for that populist moment. And that's why they were sold a bunch of crap by propagandists on Twitter who were telling them it's going to be a never-ending Creed concert. We're going to be drinking Code Red Mountain Dew and playing Xbox, and it's going to be the golden age. Vivek Ramaswamy and Tulsi Gabbard are going to put America first or whatever.
Nick is generally funny, man. I don't care what you say. A never-ending Creed concert, man. He cracks me up. But this is right. A lot of people that did support Trump were, strange bedfellows to the GOP. He attracted a lot of Maha movement people that had backed RFK Jr., a lot of dissidents that couldn't stand Harris, might have had reservations for Trump, but plugged their nose. But when he doesn't deliver for those people and what they wanted, this is the natural result. It's what's going to happen. So we're not going to be drinking Code Red Mountain Dew in our golden age, I guess.
Like they were just not prepared for that. And now here we are. I was right. I told you so. This is not MAGA. There is nothing MAGA about any of this. This is not America first. None of this is putting Americans first. Every promise has been broken. There are no real victories. Trump has not delivered. It has been one disappointment after another, and that is because of corruption. That is because the Trump regime, just like every other regime, has been corrupted by money. That's the bottom line. You have been disappointed. You fell for it again. You believed them when they made a promise, which they never intended to keep. They said things to you to get your vote, knowing full well that once they got it, they were going to work for the donors.
Man, I couldn't agree with him more. I think he's right on the nail here. And if I'm to steel man a Trump fan that's still hanging on, I would say something like, well, there is evidence that illegal immigration has been reduced under Trump. And that's true, but then look at how much ground that cedes if that's your main issue too. Because Nick's right, he hasn't done anything for mass deportations, if that's what you want. And that was idealistic to think he ever would. Kind of utopian in my mind to think that, 50 million Americans could ever be mass deported. It just was never going to happen. But otherwise, I agree with him totally. It is the donor class that rules under Trump. It's corruption. When he says Epstein who, why are you still talking about Epstein? That said it all to a lot of people. When he bombed a new country despite saying no new wars, that said it all. While he flirts with regime change now, in Venezuela, siding again with the neocons, that has been telling to a lot of people. Time and time again, you can see what this is, and people that study this closely know that it's the donors at work. This is what we call the deep state. The deep state remains the same regardless of the names. That's what we're seeing under this Trump administration.
That's who pays for the cabinet appointments and the ambassadorships. That's who captures the bureaucracy. And that is why the system is sclerotic. That is why the system is slow and broken and unanswerable to the people and not even thinking about the people. And you're almost better off with Biden than with this. This is just like criminal stuff.
I don't know if you'd be better off under Biden, but I think the policies of Washington are remarkably the same. We still have the same state agencies, the same income tax bracket breakdowns, more spending under Trump than Biden. We have more wars now than under Biden. You know, it's indistinguishable. And I think that would happen if Kamala Harris was elected too. Now you can say they might have ushered in a new wave of, hate speech codes, and, they actually might have gotten their Ministry of Truth to police disinformation on the internet this time. But with a Republican Congress, I don't think they could have had that. Republicans are much better in opposition, of course, because they're feckless in power and cowardly in power. That's what Nick's pointing to, and I think he's exactly right.
And I'm not saying I'm it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. I don't care. But all Trump seems to have done, he's just as bad as the Democrats. The only difference is Trump has given people a false sense of victory. Trump has lulled people into complacency. Everybody thought the people triumphed when Trump won. He's different. He's talking like the rest of us. That's what is particularly sinister about the Trump movement, is the way that it functioned as a Trojan horse. Biden was worse. Kamala would have been worse. But at least with Kamala, nobody would be under any illusions. Would Kamala be better? No, she would have been far worse. The economy would be worse. Immigration would be worse. It all would be worse. But here's what matters, and here's the difference. Nobody would be under any illusions about what it is.
Yeah, I think he's right about that. You could argue that under a Kamala Harris presidency, she's in office. Well, at least that doesn't push the Overton window of the right, into this area of duplicity under that kind of administration, showing that, hey, the legacy media that treats this as kind of an unprecedented disaster, and we can not pay attention to them if we want. But at least under a Harris presidency, if I'm to steelman the case for that being better, at least you wouldn't expose this movement as being totally fraudulent in the GOP with the complacency that this brings, that conservative activists are fine with this rather than actual America First principles that they wanted represented in their government. I guess that's the case to be made. I don't have a problem with saying she would have been worse, but he's right. We wouldn't have thought anything different of her. At least thinking people wouldn't.
That it's illegitimate. The elections are fake. The government's corrupt. She's not really in charge. The system hates us. There'd be no love lost there. And everybody would be acutely aware of the problem. You'd have righteous indignation. You'd have anger. There'd be a revolutionary fervor. But instead, with Trump, you get the pressure release valve. And no matter what he says or what he does, 50% of his audience, he has this diehard base of supporters. They'll support it no matter what. If he bombs Iran, they'll support it. If he brings in 500,000 Chinese students, they'll say he doesn't really mean it. If he fails to deport people, they'll say, well, who cares? The border's secure, so what?
Yeah, it's always unmanifested genius behind the scenes, right? That's the 4D chess argument we get from so much of the portions of his base. But people that are actually thinking and analyzing this on the basis of principles and agenda rather than the cult of personality know better. Nick's right.
That's the problem. And so this is when you start to begin to think politically and start to think about what our real end game is. My end game is not to elect Republicans and be marginally better than the Democrats. No, my end game is I do want an energetic president. I want an energetic, forward-thinking, progressive, disruptive, populist executive branch that is gonna fucking break the back of the power in the country and put Americans first. No more kickbacks, no more deals, no more corruption, no more special interests, no more super PACs. We literally need a real leader that is actually popular and in control with agency, someone smart to get in, fire everybody, bring in his own people, and literally make the trains run on time. Literally build the new cities, raise the skyscrapers from the ground.
Okay, I think this is very utopian. I don't think you're going to get that from anyone in Washington because it's a systematic issue. One man can't do that. And that's the lesson we should learn, is that the centralization of political power makes it so these entrenched lobbies prevent that possibility from happening. So if I'm to critique Nick on anything in this video, I just think that that's too utopian to dwell on. And Trump should be the ultimate example through which to prove that to people like Nick. And I hope he learns from this and at least drifts into the mentality of maybe, political centralization and nullification and non-compliance schemes. The stuff that worked throughout U.S. history, like in the Stamp Act, when law enforcement was meddled with on a decentralized level to push back at the British regime. Why secession in the form of the Declaration of Independence did work to secure at least the liberties of the American colonies from transgressions by the British government for some time at least. I think the Republic went off the rails shortly thereafter, but that is true too. The Fugitive Slave Acts, northern states resisting, the enforcement of the Fugitive Slave Act prevented, slavery and, the iron-handed fist of federal law enforcement and marshals from apprehending fugitive slaves. All these things, they don't rely on centralized power. They don't even rely on a particular political party. They rely on single-issue coalitions among dissidents in localities to push back against that. So the states should say, FDA, shove it down your ass if you want us to ban these substances in our states. Montana should be, screw you if you want to enforce federal gun control in our states. That is the way forward in a decentralized system that recognizes federalism, the original cornerstone of the United States. It was not supposed to be a nation. And when you rely on foreign power to try to do these things with the hope or aspirations that it's going to fix everything, I think it's just wrong-headed. I think we can't ask for that. It's not feasible whatsoever in the current age.
Build the factories. Put us on a war footing. Make the fucking country great again. That's all I'm interested in. If it's not that, I don't want it.
Well, if you want a war footing, you should be happy with Pete Hegseth, who boasted about America being on a war footing and has postured in every direction in that way. So I'm not with him on the federal government and like the head leader of this cult of personality is going to be building factories. No. That's entrepreneurs, and there's no strong man that would encourage it. Strong men act like impediments toward that.
So don't tell me the next best thing is this. The next best thing is we're going to elect Trump, and he's going to make another joke about how you say Buttigieg's name. We're going to elect Trump, and hey, man, it's better than the Democrats. I don't care. They're murdering our country. On what timeline? Are we going to murder the country in 10 years or 5 years? You're still murdering the country. Trump promised to be that leader. He's not. It's time to move on.
Yeah, I'm exactly with Nick on that last statement for sure. It is enough to satiate part of Trump's base to own the libs by mispronouncing Buttigieg's name, right? That's just an example, but there's all sorts of those things. That's enough to get support from a lot of the GOP. It's sad. You don't have to back a single principle or deliver on a single promise. That is going to be enough. But those of us who care about our country being murdered in front of our eyes, which I agree with Nick on that, we demand better. We have to demand better. And I don't think we're going to get it out of Washington, D.C. It's not going to come from a particular political party or not. It's going to be single-issue coalitions of dissident Americans who have had enough. That's the ultimate lesson of the American Revolution, by the way. It was something like 3% of the populace that fought against the British Empire that aligned for that cause. It wasn't magnitudes under a particular political, party whatsoever. It was people incensed because they cared about principle above party. They cared about principle above sometimes their own personal well-beings because of how this would affect their posterity. something Americans just completely don't care about. They're fine with placing their posterity in shackles if it means expanding Social Security or Medicare or the empire or corporate welfare, or if it's sending billions of dollars into the coffers of Boeing. People are willing to forego their posterity and indeed forge their shackles of their kin for that now. It's a perverted reality under which we live, but I don't think salvation is going to come through Washington, D.C. It's through, non-compliance, nullification at a state or local level. States are tyrannical too. So I advise nullifying egregious and immoral and unconstitutional mandates of the states by localities. Have your sheriff stand up against those cretins and say, we won't be beholden to your immoral plots to, violate our liberties of our people. So there was a lot in this I thought was good. Mostly agree with Nick there, had a little bit of pushback, but he's right. I think this administration is off the rails, and I don't think there's anyone to blame but Trump and maybe the people that got duped by this cause. And again, I think there was plausible reasons to support. If you were going to support a presidential ticket, I think there were plausible reasons to support this one over the Harris ticket, the deep state puppet ticket, indeed. But we should have been under no delusions that this would fix everything. Because all the precedents in American history, especially from the progressive era, tell a very different tale, that they're going to be co-opted by lobbied interests in D.C., unleash their empire-building schemes, and that won't stop until people start thinking differently on terms of how they coalition, as far as single-issue coalitions, and how they arrange political resistance. And spoiler, it's not through either the Democratic or the Republican Party in my mind. But what do you guys think? Do you think I'm right about this? Is Nick right? Has this gone off the rails? Is it even salvageable by Trump anymore? Is he right about it being based on the lobbied interests? Let me know in the comments down below. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you like this video, please consider becoming a YouTube member. You can do that by clicking the join button below. And if you do that, I really appreciate it. So much so, in fact, that I'll give you the gift of being able to access all of my videos before they go live to the general public on YouTube. You'll be able to see all those members' videos right now, the members only ones. Also, if you want a free copy of my first book, Compact of the Republic, click the link in the description below. It'll shoot you off to a website. Just plug in your email there, and it'll send you that copy, PDF form, free of charge, no obligation. And until I see you guys next time, no more war, no more debt, no more inflation, and no more empire. Peace out, guys. Catch you in the next one.